My name is Anshika Agarwal and I study in grade 9B of Birla Open Minds International School, Hyderabad. Today, I will be narrating my story, The Space Bus. An assortment of vehicles ranging from a fleet of sleek black space gliders to a solitary battered white bus spray painted with a faded The Space Bus on the side stood regardless of the dividing lines in the parking lot of the ramshackle building, with the lopsided sign of Mars Bar creaking on rusty hinges, at least 50 asteroids away from the nearest meteoropolis. Easily the most human looking person on the bar stool, calling for doubles and triples of Andromeda's manacles and scarlet blood, was Driver, but that was because she was human, the only human in space. That's what she thought till she found a 13-year-old stowaway sneaking around. I'm Neel from Earth, obviously, and my mom's the head of research at the CBSE, the Collaborative Bureau of Space Exploration. I got bored, so I stole a spacesuit and got into a space projectile, only it was a satellite, so I had to get off and got into trouble with these big grey gorillas and nicked a glider thing to get away, only I was being followed, so I crashed here and then I met these pink medusas, so basically, you're a catastrophe on legs, she finished. She thought for a minute. Look, kid, the Earth's near impossible to penetrate from outside because of its atmosphere. Believe me, better people than you have tried. Assuming you want to get back, I can give you a ride till Mars, then you're on your own. Or I could take you to Centurion, a meteoropolis, and leave you with some food and cash. Who said I need your help? I don't even know you, Neel. Fine, and it's Driver to you. She stalked off. The last bell for departure rang and the doors of the space bus slammed shut. Driver, having finished giving tickets to the aliens crammed in, smirked as she was joined by a black hooded figure at the wheel. Oh, shut up, Neel retorted. I'll take option one. So, why don't you want to go back to Earth? He started conversationally, as half the bus emptied out at Centurion after hours of bumpy travel. Ignoring him, Driver locked up the bus and left. She returned after what seemed like ages, handed out tickets, rang the bell, and started driving. My name's Kalpi, she began, deftly dodging a stray meteor. I was an astronaut at ISRO, but that's almost a century ago. You're what, 40? The kid interrupted, adding hastily when she glared. Sorry, I forgot people age differently in space. Driver finished glaring. My superior sent me on a mission to reach Mars. But there was a failure in the rocket and it went off course. I crashed on a lone asteroid with no contact and almost no resources. I thought they would try to search for me, but help never came. I finally built this bus out of the debris of the rocket and got off the miserable rock. This bus saved my life then and she's keeping me alive now too. You should come back, Neel positively glowed. It'll be so cool. The media will go nuts. No, but we're done here. Silence again. We're being tailed, by the way, did you know? Neel said suddenly. Looking out in alarm, Driver saw Jupiter Royal gliders flanking them. Okay, folks, we're now making a pit stop on the nearest meteoropolis, Ginkona. Sorry for the inconvenience, you'll be reimbursed. By the time Driver and Neel boarded the bus again, the meteoropolis was almost deserted. None of the passengers had returned, and Driver was bristling. You idiot, she snarled. You had to go and pick a fight with some of the most stuck-up tanks in the galaxy. Technically, they called me a wee baby first, yelled an equally angry Neel. Do you have any idea what this means? That first-class royal honor was the one thing that makes them stop treating you like a scab, and I had to trade that and the triple hydrangean cells to get away. We'll be lucky if the bus doesn't die out by the time we get halfway to Mars. Well, luck's worked out just fine for me so far, muttered Neel mutinously. Driver bit her tongue and focused on veering away from an off-course spacer. Look, kid, I don't have to get you back, she said finally. I'm doing it, so don't make it any harder for me than it is. Neel stiffened visibly and nodded once. So will you? She'd forgotten the kid entirely in the few stomach-turning moments of getting through the asteroid belt. Will you take me to Mars? He was deliberately not looking at her. I'll try, Driver answered indifferently, pretending not to notice his sudden relaxation at the words. The red planet loomed into view. Her heart jumped into her throat at the sight of the familiar blue and green planet hovering not too far. She had always steered clear of it. Driver was always prepared, always had been, since the time her brother punctured her favorite football. But nothing prepared her for the giant space rock that hurtled seemingly out of nowhere into the side of the bus. For the second time in her life, Driver felt shockingly numb, weightless, non existent except for the hard lump in her stomach that was dragging her down into oblivion, while a tangle of voices echoed in her ears. Lost. Someone was shaking her. Driver, Kalpi, Dolt, get up. One of the voices sorted itself out, clear, and as her vision sharpened, matched with a pale, worried face. Hands off, kid, she grunted, which was a sign of normalcy to Neel, because he rolled his eyes and let her get off the floor on her own. Where are we? Driver asked when she had mustered enough breath to talk. Neel shrugged. He seemed fine except for the scratch on his cheek. Looks like Earth's moon to me, he said. What? Driver looked around properly. Sure enough, they were surrounded by an endless plain of grey rock, and closer to Earth than she could ever remember being. Oh no, she muttered. Oh no, 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 no. She started pacing around, following up by frantically trying to start the bus, which refused point blank, and finished magnificently by banging her head on the horn. Done? Neel asked when the long drawn note had died away. She gave him a death stare in reply. What was that all about? You don't know anything, do you? She said flatly. He didn't answer. Long back, there used to be a colony on the moon. This was a trading center back then. In case you don't know, there's a dark side of the moon where there's no light. That part keeps shifting with the lunar cycle. Things just disintegrate there. You always have to stay on the light side where we are now. The colonizers kept moving to stay alive. They had a whole scheduled system for that. But the moon's unpredictable. There was an unscheduled lunar eclipse once, and more than half the aliens here, nobody comes here since. In other words, we're goners. There was silence. Are you always this pessimistic? Neel wanted to know. What? Are you kidding? You're the woman who made this bus out of scraps. If you can't get us out, who can? Driver froze, thinking, and sighed. I can fix the bus, but it's a long shot. We don't even have any more cells, and the bus needs extra fuel to get off. It's the bus that's still keeping us breathing here, but it's almost spent. Assuming we get out alive, we can head back to Mars and refuel. Neel's face, which had been brightening, fell. Mars? He said hollowly. Where else would we go? Oh, I don't know. Let me see. Home? Neel yelled. This bus is my home. Space took me in when Earth abandoned me. I am not going back there, she shouted. But you said, I said no. What part of that do you not get? Normally, when people say no, oh, forget it, I'm going. He switched on his wristband, which expanded to cover him in a spacesuit, and stormed off the bus. Driver didn't stop him. Hours later, Neel had floated to a stop on the grey ground and was drawing patterns in the dust, trying to think of a plan through his irritation at Driver. How could anyone not want to go home? Mom was right. Space did funny things to people. He stared unseeingly at the silver-grey puff of sand that had risen when he noticed something strange. The ground and space directly in front of him were much blacker and darker than that around him. That must be the dark side, he thought. He stared at it for almost a whole minute before realizing that it was moving towards him. His legs seemed to have frozen suddenly, and he tried to run, only to find he could just hop like an awkward kangaroo. He kept moving anyway, but the darkness was faster than him. It was closing in, almost upon his heels now. Neel prepared to disintegrate as it swallowed him. He hoped Driver would know he was sorry for her trouble with the JRs. Wait for it. Nothing happened. Everything around him was pitch black, but he was fine. It was too dark to know if his eyes were open or not, but he didn't care. I'm not dead. I'm not what? Someone grabbed his arm tightly and dragged him. He struggled before recognizing the vice-like grip and shouted in relief. Hang on, kid, Driver said, dragging him into a familiar vehicle whose headlights flashed half-heartedly, hardly denting the dark. Don't take off your suit, she instructed, heaving him in. There's not enough fuel to create an oxygen zone. She was enveloped in a translucent sheen. It wasn't much brighter in the bus than outside. Why are we only organic matter disintegrates? The space bus is inorganic. Look out for a hole or something though. Not sure how long this will last. She tapped the dashboard anxiously. They both squinted in the dim light as the bus groaned along tediously. There seemed to be nothing but darkness for miles. There, Neel said suddenly, and driver turned blindly, hoping to high heavens that he was right. He was. They screamed as the bus fell headfirst into a ditch, going in considerably before getting stuck. The lights flickered and died out. Jump! Roared driver, clutching his hand and shoving him out of the bus, following closely. The door slammed automatically behind them as the system died out. Thankfully, there was enough space to creep against the wall and a fissure to hide in till she managed to turn on the flashlight in her wrist connectors. It's a tunnel, she whispered. What's at the end of it? Probably not a toll booth. They kept staring down it warily until with a rip the bus began to fall apart. Move, move! Driver pushed him ahead and they both ran down the narrowing tunnel. A dark light seemed to glow in its depths and they followed it until at last they broke into a cave. What's that? Neel asked. A strange something, like a tiny black hole, was floating in the middle of it. It's a wormhole. Driver stared at it, transfixed. It acts like a black hole, but it's less powerful. It can take you anywhere you want, but it could also get you stuck in a time loop. Well, what are we waiting for? Neel jumped up. Let's go home. Oh, come on, lady. He rolled his eyes when she refused to budge. Your bus is gone. You've lost your status with the JR and the tradable cells. What other choice do you have? Driver stared at the hole. Neel tugged her hand towards it, but she wasn't paying attention until a shriek from the space bus brought her back to Earth. Literally. Thank you.